welcome to the Mariah Jean Fit YouTube channel. I'm Coach Mariah. Make sure you like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos as much as possible so we can reach a broader audience. We appreciate your support and enjoy the video. Hello and welcome to another vlog on YouTube and podcast on Spotify by the Fit Minds podcast. Coach Mariah here. Today we are going to dive into the topic of the benefits of strength training for women. Now I do apologize if my voice starts to dip out a little bit. I have been a little bit sick of recent. I'm feeling much better now, but my voice is struggling a little bit to project, so it's a bit husky today. I don't know whether anyone actually is going to appreciate that or find it more irritating than anything, but here we go. So we're going to talk about the benefits of strength training for women. Now, I won't isolate women of, the sole beneficiaries of strength training, but for the purposes of this podcast, I'm going to focus on women and make some special mentions of benefits from men along the way. Now, before everyone gets too defensive about why I'm talking about strength benefits or strength training benefits for women, I just want to address that it's because we have a bit of a disconnect in the industry, or we have had in the past, with women and specifically training weights versus men. Men seem to be able to adopt weights training a lot easier and certainly even adopt the idea that it is beneficial for them, whereas women need a little bit more convincing. So this is why I'm going to focus on women. So firstly, I'm going to talk about body recomposition and shaping. So when we talk about body recomp, and this is a terminology that's thrown around quite a lot, but this is basically I would say the technical term used for losing body fat and gaining muscle. Now, as much as it is a miracle or unicorn process to do that at the same time, it is the process of fat loss and of muscle gain, so two different processes required to see more definition in your body, but you do need to gain muscle to do that, right? So if I had $1 for every time a woman told me she wanted to tone up and get fit, I would be a millionaire. I know that we probably hear it quite often in the fitness industry as coaches, and in all seriousness, this is the way to do it, right? Weights training, resistance training. If you are currently avoiding the weights section, or you're just using machines, or maybe you're not even using machines, maybe you're just, walking on the treadmill, or you're using the Stairmaster or the cross trainer, and you're wondering why you're not seeing results. You're not seeing that definition. You're not seeing, muscles coming or appearing into areas that you want them in. And it's funny too, when we talk about muscle mass, on that note, it's like women just are almost opposed to using the word muscle. It's like, I want to see more definition. I want to be toned. I want to be defined. Yeah, I want to see more lines. But it's like nobody wants to say, I need more muscle, because they liken that to being a manly process. And it's actually the same process required. You do need to grow muscle in order to see it. Okay, so you can't just reveal the nothing that you've been working towards after your fat loss, because we don't have a lot of muscle naturally as women. So if you're wanting definition, you need to have something there to start off with. So this is the way to do it, lift weights, lift heavier than you probably have done so in the past. If you're not currently seeing a whole lot of change, and even then, lift often, okay? Because there are quite a few people out there who might be doing maybe 2, maybe 3 resistance training sessions a week. As much as that is going to contribute towards change in your physique, you will get some muscle mass changes there and increases there. You're not going to see a marked increase from that. Now, I'm not saying you need to train resistance training 7, 8, 9 times a week, but it's somewhere in the middle. So anywhere from that 3 to 5, even up to 6 if you're a real avid gym goer. And women are, funnily enough, stronger than they realize. So I've probably said this in previous podcasts, but women are most often not lifting enough. They're not really trying to push themselves in the gym, or they think they are, and they could probably go a bit heavier. And men are often lifting too much. Okay, so usually you'll see the ego lifting coming from men, and from women, not so much. And with women as well, I find that a lot of them are scared to go up to the next weight, or to do a couple more reps, or to put in a little bit more oomph and to hold a weight because they're afraid of injury, which obviously is something that I can address in a separate podcast. But in this podcast, I'm going to talk about the benefits of strength training and why we do it. Why, as women, we can benefit from resistance-based training from the get-go, from literally as early as we can start in a gym to the day we die, basically. It's not something that you need to shift away from. In some cases, obviously, if you are experiencing things like osteoporosis, you want to try and steer clear of high-impact work, repetitive work, which we actually can see that resistance training can prevent osteoporosis and bone density issues, along with obviously preventing things like calcium deficiencies and prolonged periods of dieting for women. But all in all, resistance training is not the enemy of osteoporosis. In fact, it could definitely, and it does definitely help with preventing it in aging and those bone fractures as well. So when I tell my clients that they can hip thrust 100 kilos for say 10 reps, right? It's like, you can do this. I know you can do this. They don't often believe me. And then in no time, they're surpassing this weight and they're shocking the hell out of themselves. I've had many clients start with me who literally hip thrust the bar or hip thrust 30 kilos and kind of stay there for a while. But again, the benefits of going heavier is that you get a set of glutes. Thankfully, we are seeing a gradual shift away from cardio heavy programming. Thank God we are getting people off the treadmill. Not saying the treadmill is terrible for you, but certainly living on there isn't a good idea. And obviously the fear around weights training for women is slowly dissipating. This is wonderful. And cardio isn't necessarily awful for you. It's just not the major exercise choice if you're wanting to see more shape, create an X frame, and to add a little bit more muscle to those areas. If you want your legs to be firmer, if you want them to look a little bit more muscular, if you want more definition, if you want to see the teardrop in your quads, if you want to see a bit of hamstring definition, if you want some lines, if you want to even reduce the appearance of cellulite, you need to bring the muscle underneath your skin outwards, and that's what that growth is, right? So, and the X frame is this tiny waist that, girls are chasing a small waist. And it's like, it's no wonder that I look like I have a smaller waist because I have grown my back so it is bigger to make my waist look even smaller. My glutes are bigger to make my waist look even smaller. So it's all proportionate. Back when I was probably 20 kilos lighter than I am now, 25 kilos, it was obviously a lot less muscle that I had. I was very thin. I didn't have any shape. I was straight up and down. And this was as a result of the fact that I didn't have any muscle mass on me to create the shape. And yet I was only one dress size smaller. Not in my waist. My waist size didn't change as I grew muscle. But, again, this obsession with weight and sizes and things like that actually holds us back from the actual physique that we want, which is, being toned and defined, which I really can't stand that terminology, but it is basically building muscle. However, I do see, and on that note of things improving, I do see some lingering impacts of the 90s, 2000s, pancake bums, scale weight obsessions, clothing size obsessions, and chasing the hip bones, the flat tummies, without the consideration of resistance or weights training, for improving body composition. So there are still some women out there flogging themselves silly on the treadmill, running on the road, not even because they enjoy running. Don't get me wrong, if you enjoy running, please continue to do it. But if there are women out there who are chasing, losing as much weight as possible and smashing themselves with cardio, and they're not considering resistance or weights-based training for this particular endeavor, they're fighting a losing battle, because eventually they end up at the end of this road where they reach their goal weight or whatever, and they're not even happy with the way that they look or the way they feel. They don't feel feminine. They may have lost the muscle even the muscle they had there as well. So this is not bashing on about how bad cardio is. This podcast is talking about how good strength training is. If there is some bits of cardio added on top, awesome. But I don't believe that it should be the center of any female program unless their endeavors are, if they are in a sport that is cardiovascular based exercise. So often the burning question, is for me as a coach, and certainly I would consider myself to be an expert in a field of body recomp and bodybuilding. I would hope. I'm not tooting my own horn and saying I'm an expert in comparison to the likes of some of the best well-known coaches in the industry, but more so in the sense of natural bodybuilding for women. And because I've been doing this for so long and certainly have achieved the results for numerous dozens of women, hundreds of women, the burning question is, how do I see more definition? Right? How do I see more definition? And what you're really asking for there is, how do I see the outline of my muscle? That's what it is. Definition, lines in your abs, lines in your biceps, lines in your quads, lines in your hamstrings. More definition is the outline of your muscle. Okay, that's how we get definition. You don't get it from just outlining nothing, bones, because then it would just be, you'd be bony, right? So that's how we do it, right? So we have to have the muscle there to begin with. I keep going back to this, and this is why resistance training is beneficial. Without the presence of weights training to build the muscle you want to see, you're not going to see shit, okay? So if you're not doing resistance training and you want to see more definition, you are not going to see shit. You're not going to see anything if you're just running, if you're just doing a cross trainer, if you're just doing bike, maybe a little bit if you're in a calorie deficit, but the less dense muscle you have, the less you're going to see, right? So if you are doing a lot of cardiovascular based activities, you'll have a lot of what's called type 1 muscle fibers. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of runners will have a lot of these fibers, but they're very thin, they're very small. Yes, you can see definition with that, but you will often find that you don't get the shape that comes with it. So you're not going to get the big glutes, the nice rounded butt. You're not going to get those nice sculpted legs. You're not going to get the nice sculpted shoulders, etc. Because if you have a look at runners, it doesn't reflect that type of body type. It is very much a straight up and down physique. And if that's your cup of tea, by all means, continue on with that path. But remember that why would you train predominantly like a person to achieve that physique if that's not what you wanted? So obviously you can't see lines without muscle there to begin with. We know this now. Getting leaner only to reveal low muscle mass may simply see you look slimmer, but not necessarily reach that toned look that you keep going on about. And this is why I don't use the word toned in any sort of part of my marketing. I don't use tone up. I don't use toning not because I don't believe that, I know what it means. I know what women want when they say that to me, but I don't believe in encouraging that type of terminology, because that just basically almost goes against building muscle, in a sense that when I say to people, okay, well, you'd like to build a little bit of lean muscle mass and lose some body fat, it's like this weird light just goes off in their head and they all of a sudden stop listening, and they don't realize that it's exactly the same as toning. It's just, I'm not going to use that word because it's not a singular process. So a common misconception is that weights training needs to be paired with excessive cardio, added cardio in general, right? So it's like, I often get this question from clients: when do I need to add my cardio in? Should I add cardio in? Do I need to add extra cardio? Do I need to do more? Blah, 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 blah. And the answer is no. You do not need to do extra or more. If you've been given a step count, which is probably very reasonable, that's probably going to be enough on top of your resistance training for the purpose of fat loss, for sure. There are some instances where we would add additional cardio in, very rare cases where I would add additional cardio in. But for most cases, if you're wanting to see definition, if you're wanting more shape, if you're wanting to create that illusion of that X-frame, the smaller waist, the bigger butt, the broader shoulders, which is honestly a beautiful look, it is very feminine, weights training is the answer. That is the answer. It's not about mixing it all up and adding a ton of cardio on top of it as well just to finish it off. All that's going to do is burn energy. Cardio is only going to burn energy. It's not necessarily going to promote a lot of type 2 muscle fiber growth or even maintenance, right? So, and you can definitely add cardio in and still maintain muscle mass, absolutely, but you still have to have the energy availability from food there. So often when you pair dieting with resistance training and then intense bouts of cardio, you can see some muscle wastage there. And it's just a case of, especially with women, it's worse for us because we don't have the help of testosterone. So, you could obviously, at most, as I said, we're talking walks on top of resistance training. So this is the only thing I really prescribe myself. It sounds boring, but that's because it is. It is repetitive. It is monotonous. It isn't some sort of weird magical pony effect that we just, wave our wands and here you go, do 30 minutes on the bike and sit on your head and juggle eggs. Like, that's too complicated, number one. And number two, it's not efficient. And number three, it's not required. It's just not necessary. So One of the best ways to preserve muscle mass is to just keep those walks there. And yes, there are arguments against and for, and yes, you can incorporate cardio, and no, you don't have to just do resistance training and walking. But in essence, if you're currently working with pretty low muscle mass, probably one of the smartest things you can do is stop fucking running. Stop doing so much cardio. If you do want to build up your glutes a little bit more, try and use your energy expenditure on that instead of necessarily, going for multiple runs in a week, unless you're training for a marathon, unless you're training for a triathlon, unless you are just a cardio bunny and you love that life. And don't get me wrong, as I said, I do have clients who do triathlons. I've got a marathon runner at the moment. I've got people who do volleyball. I do have clients who do team sports, but they still have resistance training incorporated into their program in their week. So perhaps you could also, have a mixture. So circuit training and resistance training, like maybe one session a week circuit training, putting some cycling in there if you're looking at improving your cardiovascular, your VO2 max, cardiovascular-based fitness. But, obviously, as I said, the specifics of this is that, yes, good for heart health, absolutely, but how frequently it's required is dependent on what your goal is. So if your goal is to improve with your running and you want to run a marathon and that's your only focus and you're not that bothered by how you end up looking at the end of it, that's okay. You'll end up with a runner's body. But it's really important to understand that if you have a specific goal to see more definition, which is honestly 95% of the female population that come to me, it's going to be resistance training, okay? And then obviously, as I said, walks on top of that, and little bits of maybe a circuit or a HIIT session here and there if you want to improve that side of things. So growing the butt, seeing the fun lines in your legs, your back, your shoulders, even your abs, if that's your goal, dieting heavily and smashing cardio is not the way to go about it. So again, this podcast is focused on the benefits of strength training, but I have to address this because it is a very prominent issue and certainly something that I need to close the book on. And if you are listening to my podcast, I will always stand with this type of personal and professional opinion for sure. I won't bash cardio, but I certainly won't necessarily endorse it for the purpose of body recomp in large amounts. So even with cardiovascular-based exercises, sports and events, as I mentioned, they do resistance sessions. So you'll be looking at a couple resistance sessions, training sessions a week, and it's not going to be circuit training. It's going to be things like squats, deadlifts, conventional exercises that are pretty standard in a gym program. And that's to actually strengthen the muscles, okay, and the joints. So the firm butt, the sculpted legs, the nicely capped shoulders and V-taper is to give this illusion of the small waist. It all comes from creating, growing, and maintaining muscle mass. And the reason why I repeat myself with this is because hopefully it sticks, okay? If you need to send this to somebody that you know who's doing too much cardio, who's probably not doing any strength training or just kind of giving a lackluster strength training session and then jumping on the treadmill for 2 hours for literally no fucking reason, it's a good idea to send them this podcast. It's difficult to convert them as well. Like it really is difficult to convert cardio bunnies over to weights training. It's not like a cult or anything. It's just like, I think often that we will see people who are disheartened with the results they get from just cardiovascular based fitness endeavors. And it's like, well, if you're not happy, why don't you change something, So eating sufficient protein as well, you need to pair with it. So that's the other thing. Like we could go on about training hard, putting effort in, keeping a high RPE with the sessions that count, all that type of stuff, sorry. But if you're not eating enough protein, which again is a major issue that we have with women, it's like we don't really, and I know this because I've worked with women for 6 years now, we don't really like meat that much. Like I have not come across a lot of women who are big meat eaters. And obviously we know that meat is a huge source of protein, chicken breast, lean beef, kangaroo, like this is all going to be protein sources. Protein powder is another one, right? But it's still for some fucked up reason has this stigma attached to it that protein powder is designed for getting like guys big. And it's so intriguing because protein powder, it's funny, the male version of the protein powder with the marketing on it versus the female version of the protein powder is actually weirdly enough higher in protein per serve. And the female protein powder has a ton of like fillers and fats and carbs that you just don't necessarily need in there, to make it look like it's not as high in protein, which makes zero sense. Like we still require protein in our diets, and protein powder is just a form of whey protein isolate. So it's taken from whey and milk, and we basically isolate it to get the protein out of it, right? And it's just intriguing to see that due to marketing and what's been really, I suppose, shoved down our throats in recent decades, is that we still haven't quite reached the point where women are like happy to have a protein powder and not worry about getting too big for taking a protein powder, which is just mind blowing. Like they'd rather, eat less and not hit their protein intake and then question why they don't see definition. It's actually crazy. So like pairing the protein with it. So protein powder is actually great for women because it can be a source of protein that can replace, say, meat that you're probably not getting enough of anyway, in your diet, to get sufficient protein to pair with the resistance training. And the reason why is because protein repairs muscle tissue, and that's its sole job, is to repair muscle tissue, and really that's going to be the building blocks of these bits of definition that you're going to start to see. So mind you, obviously less body fat will reveal that as well, but for the purpose of this podcast, I'm going to talk about what resistance training does for muscle mass. So more muscle mass actually makes us look leaner. All right. So it's no coincidence that even when I'm in an off season and I'm growing and I'm eating a ton of food, I still have lines. I still have lines in my legs. I still have lines in my back. Yes, I'm lean. I don't have as much body fat, but if I didn't have as much muscle as what I do, I probably wouldn't look this conditioned. And it's all to do with ratios. So, we actually naturally reduce our body fat percentage, if you think about it, if we're made up of more muscle, simply due to the ratio of muscle mass increasing, right? So this decreases our body fat without even having to lose any fat mass. So it's simple maths, basically. If you currently store 20 kilos of body fat, 30 kilos of body fat, let's say, on your entire body, and let's say you currently have 25 kilos of lean muscle mass. Now, when you work out the percentages, you can figure out how much lean muscle in percentages you have, how much body fat you have in percentages, and then the remaining of, bone, etc., right? So organs. But when we think about it, if we increase the muscle mass, if you imagine them next to each other, and you go up to 26 kilos of muscle mass, and let's say you still have that 30 kilos of body fat, right? You may have gone up a kilo in weight, right? But because your muscle mass has gone up, you've increased your muscle mass, so that's just muscle by itself, and that has actually decreased your body fat percentage of your total weight. So this is why trying to reach a really low body weight, right, is ridiculous for this goal that we have to look leaner, because if anything, we don't need a goal body weight, we need a goal body composition. And so this is where resistance training comes in, right? The benefits of this is that when paired with protein intake and when paired with this concept that, hold on, I don't need to be a specific weight, I need to be a specific body composition, it actually starts to change our view, and certainly then obviously we get the results that we have been chasing for so long. And generally that avoidance of gaining weight or weight not changing, and weight having to be a certain point for you to be happy, is what holds you back from what you actually want to get. It's the strangest thing, but and it's funny because not a lot of people on the internet will talk about the fact that they've got all this definition or they've got muscles, but people then ask them how much they weigh, and it's like, oh, you don't look that weight. It's like, well, how do you know what that weight is? Muscle mass is so dense. Resistance training is the key. It is the key. Weights training is the key to all of this, to summarize all of this BS that floats around about what's the best combination for X, Y, Z, yada, yada, yada. It's like, if you have a look at people who engage in resistance training regularly, they're going to say to you, it's this. It's 100% this. Please just try it. Please start doing this today. So obviously it makes us look leaner, muscle mass, and obviously resistance training, this is talking about body recomp and what it does, resistance training does for body recomp. Think about it, a hardened mass protruding from the skin, okay, muscle on your legs, your bum, protruding from the skin, coming out, reduces the dispersed body fat across a larger surface area, okay? So if you were to fill up a balloon with sand, right? And let's say that's the middle part of it, and then the outer layer might be jelly, okay? The more sand you have in that balloon, right, the thinner the layer of the jelly on the outside. So it's crazy, but when you have more dense muscle, it makes you look leaner. The fat is more evenly dispersed. So women do not have the natural hormonal profile. To clear this up, because obviously, when we talk about resistance training for women, we don't talk enough about the fact that women are afraid of getting too big and getting too bulky. Just so you know, I'm currently wearing a size small t-shirt, and my skirt I think is a size 8, and if I turn to the side, you can see like it's gapey, right? Now I weigh 71 kilos, maybe. I'm like 5'6". I hate giving these stats, but I don't give a fuck how much I weigh. I love the way I look, and I'm not too big. If you've met me in person, probably a little bit more muscular than the average person, but I'm not jacked. I'm not like huge, like I'm not a massive person, and I'm never going to get too big because I'm a natural athlete. I'm not going to go and do things that purposefully get me to a point where I am too big, right? Or big enough for me to be happy, because I respect bodybuilding so much. I don't believe there's such a thing as too big for women, because obviously they chose to do that. Why the fuck is it any of anyone else's business how much muscle they have? It's just not. So we don't have the natural hormonal profile to get too big, okay, from weights training. We do not have the natural hormonal profile to get too big. If you look at natural athletes in the world, women who have sustained muscle mass, have done weights training forever, they're not on any sort of exogenous hormones, they don't take testosterone or anything like that, okay, they're not big. If you've met them in person, if you see them in person, they are not big. They are smaller people who look muscular, and it's actually a bit of an illusion. When you put them next to a very big muscly man, they actually are tiny. They're tiny little humans. So thanks to a lack of a hormone that we don't have a lot of called testosterone, okay? The major hormone that allows men to build a large amount of muscle mass is test. So, and you see all the memes about tren and testosterone and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sure everyone talks about testosterone use all the time. It seems to be a common topic in the fitness industry. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You will never be as big as me in general as a female. Like, none of my clients, probably 1 or 2 of them, have gotten as muscular as I have out of 160 women or something that I've ever worked with. So, and they actually want to be really muscular. Like, they are like pushing really hard for it, right? And I'm not a big person. I'm not big. Like, I look muscular, but I'm not big. I would never classify myself as a big person. I do what I do on purpose. I'm a figure athlete, okay? So I am like, every fucking rep that I do, every shoulder press, every, squat, every deadlift is like, can I go heavier? Can I put another rep in there? I am trying to grow. I'm trying to grow my chest. I'm trying to grow my back. I'm trying to grow my quads. I am pushing so hard, harder than I've ever trained before, to get a little bit more muscle mass on my frame before I compete again. Now, you cannot do that shit by fucking accident, okay? You don't just jump in the weight section and pick up a 2-kilo dumbbell and press it over your head and pop up with fucking biceps in the next day, or shoulder caps that are bigger than your head. That is not how it happens. And if you haven't even tried it, how do you know? You can't just keep using examples on the internet and thinking that that is a direct reflection of how you're going to end up, because you don't even know what that person is doing. You have never met them in person, so you don't know what they actually look like in person, because trust me, photos and pictures and videos, it might make me look like I've got, jacked shoulders and stuff like that, but it's like, again, like, I'm not, meet me in person. I'm not as big as you think I am. I'm not as muscular as you think I am, and I'll admit that, because it's unhealthy to, put across to the internet that if you just go and start training weights tomorrow, that you're going to end up jacked. And it's really funny, because I do get a lot of clients start with me, and it's like they expect to get jacked in 6 months, and they actually realize how hard it is to grow muscle as a female. So, and I've been doing this for 10 years, like, it's taken me 10 years to get this much muscle. If I had help, if I had exogenous hormones, if I was being assisted, it would be much less than that, probably half the time. So big muscles on a natural female are an illusion. And even then, with resistance training, dumbbells, barbells, whatever, to get bigger, to get big to the point where it's noticeable, you actually have to try. You have to try so hard. And I think it's a bit of an insult to actual female bodybuilders or professional female bodybuilders when women say, I don't want to get too big, because we're like, please try. Please attempt. Please tell me how you're going to get too big tomorrow by, going in and doing a bicep curl. Because obviously in person, there is, as I said, when you meet these people, it's just not the same. It's like, oh, you have this aha moment where you realize we're just small people with poppy muscles. Poppy muscles is what I'll call it. And obviously, like, more defined muscles, lower body fat than the average person as well. So again, that's going to definitely, there's that whole, your shoulder caps look more defined when you have less muscle. They look bigger when you have less muscle because, less body fat. Your shoulder caps look bigger when you have less body fat because they're going to be more shapely. And in photos and videos, they're just going to look bigger. It's an illusion. So, and when tensed or posed, you can make yourself look staunch when in comparison, even to my partner, I'm a tiny person. Like, to give you an idea, I'm an 8 to 10 or a size small, and he is a men's 2XL in shirts. Okay, so like there is just such a big difference between us. And he's pretty big, and there's even, there are bigger people as well out there, more muscular people, right, that exist. So now I've cleared that up because I have to mention this in podcasts when I talk about resistance training, benefits of resistance training, but also I have to drive home with women, please stop with these assumptions. And again, if you know someone who needs to listen to this podcast, please send it to them. Resistance training does not make you look bulky. Look around you at the women engaging in it, okay? The people who are actually doing this stuff, people who are lifting weights in the gym, are they bulky or are they feminine with some muscular definition? Do they look good in gym gear? They probably look good naked as well. Like, that's the crazy thing, is that women who lift look freaking good naked. I know this, right? Like, this is what I do for work, right? The only instance you will get ridiculously jacked is when engaging in weights training as a woman, is if you are taking either injecting or orally exogenous hormones, and in which case you'd likely be attempting to do this purposefully. Okay, so you're not going to accidentally get really big. The chicks who are like big, like holy shit, like, oh my, and I've seen some chicks like that, and I have so much fucking respect for them, because I'm like, it's not just what they've taken, but it's also what they do to get there, that it takes so much discipline and so much dedication and so much strength and so much time in the gym and so many sacrifices to get to that point. So I wouldn't even call them too big either, because again, bodybuilding is, it's a sport that once you're involved in it, you understand there are just so many intricacies of it, and resistance and weights training is the beginning of it, really. If you're afraid of what the world will think of you when you decide to grow some muscle, consider this. The only people who are threatened by women with decent muscle mass are men without any muscle mass. This is really going to get I'm going to get some beef for this. Or women who are insecure or small-minded and are projecting this onto you. And trust me, I have got a tough skin over the last 10 years of doing what I do and progressively getting better at it, and progressively even becoming a better coach and achieving these results for my clients. I have had every single type of comment and shit stain awful thing that someone has said to me on the internet, mostly from men who don't have a lot of muscle, usually, or they're a little bit out of the shape themselves. And that's not being mean to people like that, but it generally comes from somebody. I have never received any sort of hate from someone who actually goes to the gym themselves, ever, right? Ever received a negative type of connotation from somebody like that. Or from women who are a little bit, I'm going to say that maybe a bit old-fashioned. They might, I don't know, not ever have stepped foot into a gym, for example. And I'm not going to judge that person. I'm not going to try and, lash out at them and try and single them out or bully them back. It's definitely a small-mindedness, insecurity, and they try to put you down in order. I know it sounds awful and cliche, but they put you down in order to normalize the way that they live their life, so that then they don't have to question what they do. They can just keep doing what they do and they can feel more normal themselves. So the only people threatened by women with decent muscle mass are men without any muscle mass or women who are insecure, small-minded, and projecting this onto you. So go figure, it's never the people you go to the gym with. It's never people who've been to the gym, who train frequently, who are muscular themselves. You're never going to receive that type of hate ever from those people. Also, why the fuck do you care about what some random uneducated idiot thinks on the internet, or the dickhead at the gym that you would never want to look like anyway? Why would you take advice from someone that you don't want to live the life of? I say this all the time. Next time you let bloody fucking Bob at the gym with a beer gut go, "Oh, you're getting a bit too big, mate." Just like literally retort back at him, same. Like, I think it's just as inappropriate for someone to comment on someone's muscle mass and size and their weight if they're a muscular person, as it is to do the same in reverse. So I don't think that there should be a double standard in that sense, and I would never comment on someone's body like that. So again, remember who it's coming from. Remember who the hate is coming from, and remember that resistance training is not the enemy, okay? So now I've touched on that, I'm going to talk about all the health benefits, because the body recomp was definitely the most important thing. But increased metabolic rate, resistance training, actually gives us a higher muscle mass, obviously, because we're building muscle. Higher muscle mass actually increases how many calories we burn daily. Cool, right? 50 calories per kilo of extra lean muscle mass, and that's without exercising. So that's just your resting metabolic rate. So just breathing for the day, if you'll just sit down all day, it's an extra 50 calories burnt without even needing to do any more exercise. So there's no coincidence I can eat a lot of food, because obviously I have a bit more muscle mass than the average female, okay? And then we see another increase in metabolic rate from exercise, including walks, weights, literally any exercise that you do, if you have a higher muscle mass, right? And again, when we lift heavier or hold heavier lifts for more time under tension, there is another increase in energy expenditure. So we burn more calories when we're able to lift a bit heavier, when we're able to exert a bit more energy. Obviously, naturally, you pick up a 10 kilo ball, you put it down, and then you pick up a 20 kilo ball and you put it down. Which movement burnt more energy? It's definitely going to be the latter, okay? So this is why lifting heavy, and that light bulb moment just went off. This is why lifting heavy is not terrible for women, because just think of it this way. Your heart is having to work harder. Your muscles are having to work harder. You're going to burn more energy doing that, okay? Instead of fucking around with your 1 kilo weights, unless you're going into rehab or recovery from an injury, etc., or just getting into the gym. But if you're fucking around with 1 kilo weights and you've been doing that for 6 months or whatever, just remember that stepping up from that is actually going to be a very positive thing for burning more energy, burning more body fat, yeah? That's how you burn body fat. You burn more of your own energy. So more calories burnt, the more food we can eat, yeah, without gaining body fat as well. So if we have a higher metabolic rate, again, as I said, I can eat more food without gaining excess body fat. Oh my God, wow, the magic, it reveals itself. And even so, the less we have to diet when losing body fat. So my calories don't have to go as low as the average female either, because I have more muscle mass. No, I'm not lucky. I did that on purpose. So part of why men can burn more energy than women can is because they have a higher testosterone, and obviously high testosterone levels allow for that higher body temperature. But they also usually have, oh my God, more muscle mass from resistance training. An energy burning machine, okay? So this is where resistance training pairs in with the increase in muscle mass, and we just burn more body fat, we burn more energy in general because we have more mass, more muscle mass to move, right? The bigger the animal, the more energy it moves. The more muscle mass that animal has, the more energy that it needs to move. Now, who wouldn't want to burn more energy or body fat without actually having to do any more? Like, how freaking cool, right? You've just earned the right to burn a couple 100 calories extra a day just because you put the effort into resistance training. It's like wild, right? How do you have a faster metabolism? Because I earned it. I spent years doing resistance training, and voila, I have the fat burning machine. Health benefits for aging and chronic health conditions, diseases, and hormonal balance, right? So resistance training isn't all about looking good, yes, it's feeling good, burning more body fat, recomp. I'm going to address this part of the podcast probably more towards the aging population, but also in general, even if you are in your 20s, 30s, 40s, so many young people don't think about their health in their 40s, 50s, and 60s because they're not there yet. And unfortunately, they get there and it's too late and they have to start then. Why not start now? Why not be the person who's still kicking at 90 because you started when you were 20? So basically, this is stuff you're going to have to think about for the longevity of your life, preventing things like falls, breaks, etc. I know that it's not something that's going to be very relevant to you right now if you're a young person listening to this podcast, but if you are middle-aged and if you are getting into those older years, and if you want to send this to your family, anyone like that, like your mom, your grandma, anybody that is going to benefit from this, and just say, look, just listen to the second half of the podcast because it's going to be really beneficial for you. Or for somebody who wants to know about this for even things like immune conditions and even things like chronic illnesses like PCOS and endometriosis. So the benefits of resistance training for the purpose of preventing age-related diseases are numerous, and not just age-related, but chronic health diseases as well, okay? And hormones, your hormonal balance. So in that resistance-based training paired with sufficient protein intake, and that's why I have to keep reiterating, you have to eat enough protein, okay? You can't just eat whatever. Eating enough protein intake in the diet can see prevention of muscle waste, atrophy, okay? Preventing and even treating symptoms of menopause, improving joint health, and preventing osteoporosis and stress fractures. So when you hear your mom, or it might be you going through menopause, or your grandma, you might have gone through menopause, it was a terrible time, etc., etc. When you hear about this type of stuff and you hear about people struggling with things like osteoporosis and stress fractures, if they're not doing resistance training, they're not doing it right, okay? This needs to be really preached. And it's not just about resistance training. You could even engage in things like yoga, because technically that's resistance on the body, okay? Body weight's not terrible. It's not, it's not that you need to go and push weights, but certainly any type of resistance on the body. Swimming is not so bad because it is a bit of resistance as well. So there are lots of different types of resistance-based training or weights training that you can use. But this is, as I said, it's going to prevent atrophy, treating the symptoms of menopause, improving joint health, preventing osteoporosis and stress fractures. And this is just a few of the things that resistance training can do for us. As we age, preserving muscle mass is key as we see total muscle mass slowly decline year by year along with aging and dying cells, okay? Now there is a scientific process to this. I'm not going to go into it. I just listened to some very complex lectures on it a couple of weeks ago actually, and I will tell you that one of the major focal points was increasing protein intake, okay, to battle the aging cells and certainly the degeneration of the cells and atrophy, staying mobile, moving, resistance training, okay? And then obviously along with that as well, looking at the frequency of that. So making sure that it's not just once a week, it's not just twice a week, but maybe 3 to 5 times a week if possible. So not to mention that strengthening muscles, okay, helps to strengthen your joints. And then obviously this prevents falls through improving overall balance and movement patterns for daily tasks. So currently if your grandma, if she's had a fall, or maybe if you think she's starting to get a bit unstable, etc., or your grandpa as well, it is so important to get them into a PT or to get them into a gym or just anything. It could be a small family gym. It could have have some bands at home, whatever, to try and maintain and build a little bit of that muscle mass back to prevent atrophy. And then obviously as a result, things like getting out of their chair, right? It's like half of these things are happening through normal daily tasks. Walking down the stairs, getting out of their chair, keeping their balance, right? Getting off the toilet, getting out of bed. Very simple tasks that still require muscle mass in order for them to function optimally. And the falls are not just accidents. They happen as a result of the atrophy, okay, and the being immobile, not being mobile. So it's often these simple aspects of life that we overlook, and currently it's such a prevalent issue with women and men as they age, and it's just not tackled quickly. Or at least that it's not being tackled as a preventative as much as what it should be. There are definitely things like nursing homes and physios that do work with the aging population, but there's not a lot of people tackling it now. I even know that people in my life, my own family, are probably not doing as much of the resistance training they should be in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. My dad does. He lugs around concrete bags and does a whole lot of work out at the property he owns, and lots of digging and shoveling and things like that. And he's a very active man, goes for walks every day, and he's 70 and he's never had a fall. He's never had a fall. He's never had any sort of issues with osteoporosis. He's got no heart problems, etc., etc. It's not a coincidence. It's because he takes care of himself. So It's not often considered or even prescribed, right? This is the sad fact. It's not often considered or even prescribed. I've had so many conversations with women about menopause. When treating menopause, people, especially, I've seen this with GPs quite a bit as well. Some GPs are really good with it, but there's definitely still a missing gap in the industry, in the health industry, where menopause is just treated as something that just happens. Oh, it just happens. Oh, you're just going through menopause. Oh, these are all normal symptoms. It's like, it's actually should be treated as a sickness or an illness or a disease, okay? In that, yes, it's normal to go through menopause, but it's not normal and it's not okay for you to experience these extreme symptoms and not have some sort of solution or something to help you through that. Yeah, to prevent and to treat and to aid and to make it a little bit of an easier time and not be so awful. So resistance training, weights training, any resistance training, yoga, like anything that's resistance against the muscle is one of the key pillars to maintaining health and fighting the symptoms of menopause. Wow, crazy. And diet, obviously, but we're talking about resistance training for this podcast. Such as hot flushes, weakness in muscles and joints, right? Reduced bone density, reduced muscle mass, lower libido, mood swings, depression or anxiety, irregular periods, digestive function, and even helps to increase a woman's metabolism as we start to burn slightly less calories progressing through menopause and aging. Okay? So when women say to me, oh, I'm just going through menopause, it's just how it is, I'm just going to have to deal with the fact that, I just keep putting on body fat, and I just have to deal with the fact that I'm getting weaker, and I have to deal with the fact that, my periods are all over the place and I get hot flushes all the time. To a certain extent, there's going to be some things that are not going to be the same anymore. Absolutely. But there are women who've gone through menopause and they do maintain a decent body composition and they do maintain their health and they keep going to the gym and they make sure that their diet is a little bit, more refined, etc. But it doesn't have to be as dramatic as, well, I've hit menopause, so therefore my life is over. That's not how this works. You still keep up those health procedures and methods to prevent this next phase from having a shitty impact on your life, okay? And it's doing something about it that makes the biggest difference. So resistance training is your best friend. If you're going through menopause, if you know someone going through menopause, resistance training is going to change their life. Weights training is going to change their life. And obviously their diet, they have to address diet as well. Even helping in stabilizing testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen to more healthy levels in women, both going through menopause and obviously just everyday people. It doesn't have to be people going through menopause, which have a significant impact on the symptoms of mental and physical health for all age groups, right? And obviously chronic illnesses and diseases. We see with PCOS, there's a heightened level of testosterone, and that can help to stabilize as well with resistance training. And one of the major things that we can prescribe for things like PCOS, for conditions like PCOS, is weights training to improve those symptoms. With resistance training implemented frequently weekly, we also see a drastic improvement, or at least mitigating the natural drop in testosterone we see in some men as they age. Okay, and I did say I was going to make special mention to men, so thanks for listening, boys, if you're still listening. Which in turn can help to improve libido, moods, bone strength, concentration, and daily energy levels, and the list goes on. Like, there are so many benefits to weights training for men. So if you feel like you've hit your 40s or 50s and you just have to, just sink into this and start drinking beer because the beer gut's coming on anyway, it's like, no, stop. It's not your age that you need to give into. It's still implementing preventative measures to help battle some of those symptoms, the drops in testosterone, the reduction in bone strength, and obviously moods and libido. Not to mention, for both sexes, regular exercise, specifically resistance training, helps to reduce stress levels through the release of endorphins, improve sleep quality, reduce blood pressure, improved heart health, reduce risk of diabetes, and many other chronic diseases. So currently we see that it's actually fucked up. We have a really bad problem with our health industry. And it is that we're so focused on medicating. We're so focused on the post stuff. We're so focused on, you've got this condition, you've got this hormonal imbalance, you've got this problem, this, right? And here's some fucking meds. Here's some meds. I'm not going to give you anything else other than meds. I'm just going to give you medication. I'm not going to tell you what the cause was. I'm not going to tell you what's probably contributing towards it, but I'm going to give you some medication. The problem with this is that all that does is it treats the issue and probably maybe effectively for a little bit, but it's only going to turn into more problems, right? More and more and more and more. Because the issue that started, or certainly maybe exacerbated it, was maybe the lack of activity, right? And then obviously as well, diet. And unfortunately, people just don't want to address those two things because it's just easier not to, isn't it? Right? It's easy to take a medication. Now, this isn't shitting on medications. There are people out there who definitely need their medications, okay? Not saying you shouldn't take medication. Please don't. I'm not a doctor, holy shit. But if more GPs and more health specialists literally turned around and said, mate, I think you got to start going to the gym and doing some resistance sessions. I think you probably got to cut out a few of those beers weekly and maybe incorporate some fruit and veggies into your diet. I know it sounds fucking boring, but you don't need this medication. You need to start doing this instead. Because we would see that these hormonal markers improve. We would see the blood markers improve. And we do see this all the time, over and over and over again, when we address the cause, the causality, the thing where it starts as to why this person is experiencing sometimes multiple symptoms, right? Obviously, in the case of things like serious chronic diseases and obviously, illnesses, it's not like a lack of exercise and, your diet is going to cause those solely and wholly, but they absolutely can treat. They absolutely can be a part of the bigger picture. They should not be neglected. And the other improvements we see, right, is also for things like it's prescribed for cancer treatment, okay? So people don't often talk about this, but cancer patients are definitely encouraged to do resistance training and to move. It's like just because they have cancer doesn't mean they should stop moving. In fact, the opposite of that. They should be doing some form of exercise to help with regenerating new cells. Obviously not as intensive, but certainly something still needs to be there. And things like immune conditions or disorders and chronic health conditions. I have 2 immune conditions myself, okay? They weren't caused by my lack of exercise. They weren't caused because I'm exercising, and they weren't caused by my diet. I just have them. They are genetic outliers, and they just happen to be something that's in my system, and I manage them very well. In fact, I manage them probably better than what I would if I wasn't exercising, if I wasn't eating the way that I am. So resistance training is fantastic for my psoriatic arthritis and also for my adenomyosis, which I have a condition of my joints, which causes very painful arthritis in every joint of my body. And I have had that since I was a child. And I don't have to go on immunosuppressant drugs because I manage this with my training and with my diet. And there are lots of people who have my condition who are currently in wheelchairs. So it's crazy, but resistance training was a part of saving my life and the longevity of my life. And the adenomyosis I've been diagnosed with recently, it is an inflammatory disease, an issue with the endometrium growing into the myotrium in the uterus. Definitely makes it for a much harder time around the time of my cycle and a lot more sensitive to foods as well. And it's certainly a condition that's being picked up more frequently now in scans. And we see that the treatment of this is, again, engaging in regular exercise and improving your diet. So resistance training can help with battling the symptoms of, as I said, painful periods. Okay, we do actually see an improvement with period pain because it's a natural painkiller. Training, moving, exercising is a natural painkiller through the release of endorphins. And even the symptoms of chronic illnesses, as I said, PCOS, endometriosis, so polycystic ovary syndrome, endometriosis, adenomyosis, as I mentioned, and indeed to assist with immune conditions such as I said, psoriatic arthritis, Crohn's, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and so many more. Sorry if I didn't mention some of MS as well as in there. Resistance exercise acts as a natural painkiller through the release of endorphins and reduction in unhealthy levels of cortisol. Because there's some levels of cortisol we can deal with. We do get some released when we exercise, absolutely. But when we have a buildup of cortisol, maybe from a stressful day or stressful week or whatever's been happening in our lives and cortisol is really heightened, we actually get a reduction in those through the release of endorphins, sometimes intra, but mostly post-workout. It aids in reducing inflammation and boosting immune function and metabolic rate. Resistance training aids in reducing inflammation and boosting immune function. So when we talk about inflammation, I'm really inflamed. Resistance training is going to help out with that, okay? Boosting immune function and metabolic rate. It's crazy. Basically, engaging in resistance training is like applying superpowers to the impacts of chronic illnesses, but also negative symptoms and types of bodily functions we might be experiencing daily without even having to have a chronic illness. We also see an improvement in sleep quality and duration in that our body temp spikes when we exercise and then declines post-exercise to facilitate deeper sleep quality, okay? So there's no coincidence you sleep like a baby after you've done a weights training session, not directly after, but certainly that night. We also require sleep to recover, in that we release HGH, which is human growth hormone, exclusively while we sleep. So it's the only time that we release it, right? And we also release human growth hormone, sorry, I lie, when we're growing a baby, okay? So women actually release human growth hormone, quite a large amount of it. But we release it while we sleep for muscular recovery and to repair muscle post-exercise. So a state of drowsiness is then induced, okay, and higher levels of melatonin are released as light turns to dark towards bedtime. So melatonin actually helps us to identify that it's nighttime. We release a lot more of this stuff, oh my God, when we've done a resistance training session for the day. Would you believe it? What's important to note is that resistance training must be paired with sufficient protein intake. And I say that because it is so fucking important in order to maintain muscle mass and form or regenerate new muscle tissue. So we can't just go and flog ourselves in the gym, or those DOMs that you're getting the next day, you're going to need to repair the tissue. And protein comes in to do that, okay? It's like a little match made in heaven. It's like locks in there, and the protein actually helps to form those new cells, okay? So 1.6 times, and I'm going to give you this key because I think it's important to just, and you can find this anywhere on the fucking internet if you really want to. 1.6 times kilos of body weight protein. I'm so sorry if people listen to my podcast and they hear me swear. It's like if you're a new person listening to this podcast, it's just that's the bogan in me, and I'm never going to remove it. So I don't apologize. 1.6 times kilos of body weight protein in grams intake. Okay, so 1.6 times your kilos of body weight, okay, in grams, intake as a daily minimum. That's a minimum recommended, but towards the higher mark of 2 times your body weight. That's an easy one to remember. And even up to 2.2 to 2.5 times body weight. So 2.2 to 2.5 times body weight as we age, okay? We actually, we need more protein as we get older. And it's funny, you weirdly enough see aging populations or older people, not actually eating. They eat less protein than the average person as it is, right? So it's crazy, we actually need more. Or even if we're looking to grow and maintain a significant amount of muscle mass in our younger years, then obviously 2.2 to 2.5, yeah? So probably more that 1.6 to 1.8 for runners, because they do still need protein, they just don't need as much, certainly for those short runs, the days where you're doing less intensive runs. So mental health, I'm going to finish off with a couple of points because obviously I don't want to drag the podcast out too much. The benefits for mental health and cognitive function, I didn't leave this one out because I know that there's probably a lot of people listening to this podcast going, but what about mental health? You only need to have one conversation with an avid gym goer to hear, I do this for my mental health. If I didn't, I'd go insane. That's me. I would go batshit crazy. In fact, I haven't trained for 2 weeks because I had a deload and I got sick. And I was really not having a fun time. So the gym and weights training is an outlet, okay? If you're currently inactive or have not been to the gym in a while and you're feeling flat, I can tell you it's likely partially the cause. Weights training can help to keep these mental health symptoms and conditions such as depression and anxiety at bay. It helps to provide mental clarity, relieve stress, and reduce cortisol, as I mentioned earlier, to give the body and mind a much needed break. Resistance training can leave us with a sense of accomplishment, empowerment, and provide an ongoing self-invested project whereby the effort we put in gives us a direct return over time. Anyone who has ever completed a full weights training session usually complains about the DOMs in the early stages, but eventually progresses to a feeling of satisfaction and that big sigh, that and smile post-workout. Have you ever seen someone with this like giddy smile coming out of a workout? It's like, yeah, you got the bug. You got the bug. I love that feeling. It's like fresh air. I've just smashed a workout. And like there is actually this proof that if you post a selfie, it's like, I'm not even saying this, there is proof that if you post a selfie online and after you've trained, etc., that you're actually more likely to stick to your workout program. So part of this is celebrating your wins. There is nothing quite like this feeling. This is where the endorphins come in, okay? A very valuable happy hormone for our mental health balance. Not to mention the serotonin release, again, another happy hormone that we get from listening to music while we train. The opportunity to put your headphones in and disappear into your own world. It is indeed a form of self-care. Improving cognitive function and concentration, even improving productivity. There is no coincidence when you engage in regular exercise and weights training, you rock up to work with a clear mind, right? It's like if people come, like you go to work, right? It's like you look different. It's not just the way you look, it's the way you feel. It's how you've been functioning better since you've been regularly training at the gym. and a clear plan of where you'd like to go for the day or the week. Training actually helps to reduce brain fog and lethargy. We can often experience thanks to a sedentary lifestyle or career, but also just in general, the structure that it gives our week, something to look forward to, something that's consistent across our week that we're accomplishing daily that can actually give back to us, right? So you're not just filling the time with watching TV, you're going and doing something productive that actually makes you feel fulfilled. Finishing a gym session can often provide the empowerment to continue on with accomplishing and completing tasks for the day. Think of it as a positive on-flow effect, all right, of your session. Or even so, a wonderful way to release frustration and pent-up emotion at the end of a day, a long or taxing, mentally really tiring day, okay? So this is where we see that if you've had a shit day at work, go to the fucking gym. You know, you've seen that guy on Instagram, go to the fucking gym. He's not wrong. Like, it cures a lot. I'm going to be honest. It cures heartbreak as well. The sense of satisfaction can come with this added bonus to your mental health, right? So it's like, it's not just about, yeah, I achieved something. We actually start to, look the way we want to as well. So there is a direct mental payoff there too. It's not just about, I feel good and the workout makes me feel good. It's also, I'm looking pretty good. Like, you start to feel more confident about yourself. So there's where we get that other extra payoff with mental health. So, finally, before we finish the podcast, I'm going to, finish with a really important one that wasn't quite addressed in the health benefits, but preventing injury and strength for daily life or work activities. So for those ladies who are struggling to pick up boxes at work or open jars by themselves, no more. Finally, we can actually, prevent injury through engaging in resistance training. It's not just about, well, I had an accident or I hurt my back because it's like, hold on, did you think about maybe that your muscles weren't ready to do that? Through building up muscle mass tissue to support joints, mobility, and stability, which is your balance, okay? So there are so many things that allow us to anatomically move in certain directions, biomechanically work in different directions. And this really does come down to how balanced and in proportion and symmetrical our mass and strength and our movements are, right? And that requires muscle mass for that to happen. So not just in preventing falls for later in life, but also preventing back injuries, knee injuries in the workplace, and daily tasks. The stronger we can be, the better. I'm gonna say that again. Obviously, we're not talking like strongest man in the world, but I'm just talking like from where you are now, yeah? The stronger we can be, the better. As long as our muscles are fully functioning and mobile, right? So it's like, don't be that guy that can't scratch your back. Like, that's obviously not, hold on, can I scratch my back? Don't be, I've just literally tried to scratch my back on camera and I'm pretty sure I can't do it, but I think my top is too tight. No, I can scratch it, I'm good. We just want to make sure that we're functioning, we're mobile, right? So it's like, we don't want to, yes, bodybuilding is not technically very functional, but with resistance training, you can see that you can remain functional and mobile. And obviously incorporating things like stretch and release work is really important for that too. So that's where it comes in. Massage and stretch work can work miracles for tight muscle groups and restricted range of motions. There's no point going to the gym and doing your lifts and going through your motions and you can't even get to full squat depth or even half of your squat depth, or you can't even get a full extension on the leg extension, or without some sort of pain in your tendons or joints. So you got to make sure that you really keep an eye on stretch and release work being just as important as your strength training. So moving effectively is just as, if not more important than the amount of weight we're lifting as well. It's really, even though I say like lift heavy for women, it's not all about lifting as heavy as possible. Okay, there is a balance here, but probably more so lifting as effectively as heavily as possible. So yes, lift heavy, but just make sure that it's effective and that you are traveling through that full range of motion and that you're not jerking the weights up, throwing the weights up, and that you're not taxing your joints. When this is compromised through joint or tendon pain or niggles, we can look at isolating and ironing out the movement imbalances to get back on track with engaging the right muscles in the movement patterns they're designed for. So it's not a mistake or a coincidence if you injure yourself. If you've tripped over something or just had an accident, that's an accident. But if you've hurt your back, if you hurt your knee, if something's happening with a joint or a niggle, it's probably going to have to do with a movement pattern. Could be to do with one muscle probably being a little bit more active than the other, etc. So there's a lot that that probably needs to be paid attention to for that, especially from a movement pattern perspective, and physios and movement pattern specialists as well. There's heaps of those types of trainers out there. But I'm saying that this is part of the importance of incorporating that into strength training. So don't neglect that. Definitely don't neglect that. Simple tasks like squatting down to pick up a box, a heavy item, reaching up to a shelf, or even performing daily household tasks, carrying the kids around, okay, getting up out of your chair, as I mentioned earlier, or even opening a jar of pickles. Does anyone eat pickles? I love pickles. Having a jar of peanut butter, okay? If you don't eat peanut butter, my partner doesn't eat peanut butter, I'll tell you what, there's an ongoing debate in this household over that. But if you can't open a jar by yourself, well then maybe we've got to work on grip strength. There are so many different things that improving your muscle mass, engaging in resistance training are going to do for the longevity of your health, for preventing injury, for helping you with daily tasks, etc. And obviously the way you look, that's an added bonus, and the way you feel. Having muscular strength can be handier than you'd realize for everyday life. It's not just about the aesthetics, okay? I do work with a lot of aesthetic-based clients, but there are so many health benefits that actually extend beyond the benefits of what you see on the surface. So on that note, that concludes today's podcast. Happy lifting, guys. Hopefully after this potty, you are feeling like you can tackle the weight section. And if you still feel like you've got a bit of gym anxiety, go back to my podcast on how to handle gym anxiety, because it was one of my earlier ones. I do think that that's probably a big contributing factor as to why a lot of people don't go and train in the gym, and why they feel like they probably need a bit of help or some guidance. But take somebody with you. And I can guarantee you know someone who goes to the gym, and if you don't, get a staff member to help you at the gym. It's so important that you just get in there, okay? Don't fuck around, just get in there. All right, that's it from me. Looking forward to doing another podcast for you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.